Hello, my name's Brandon Sheffield. I'm the creative director of Necrosoft Games and also a researcher, writer, archaeologist kind of for Digital Eclipse, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Um, so what I've been calling this thing game archaeology. And that means I'm working on these big collections here, like you've seen perhaps Street Fighter 30th Anniversary, Samurai Shodown Neo Geo Collection, which just came out, SNK 40th Anniversary Collection. These are all collections by Digital Eclipse of several games from, within a certain framework. So SNK 40th Anniversary is all SNK's games pre-Neo Geo, and we put this together kind of like a digital museum where you see all the steps along the way for them getting from their early days to their popular days with the necessary context. And in the case of Street Fighter, for example, we've got 12 games in that collection, but we try to contextualize them in their time period, how they advanced, and do all of this in this sort of digital museum presentation with a mind toward preservation. So what do? I interview developers, take video, and look for lost games and information. Then the whole team collects scans and other material and makes sure the games run well and puts them all together into this full package of games, museum, and context. So archaeological tactics, I've been calling this game archaeology. It's kind of a weird term considering like I'm not going to a dig site or something, but I am digging into the past in a way, so it's almost appropriate. These tactics vary depending on what kind of access you're given by the company that has hired you. So for Street Fighter 30th Anniversary Collection, we got lots of scans, and Frank Cifaldi, who runs the Video Game History Foundation, he especially also got more supplemental material and put these things together into a nice timeline and interesting presentations like you see on the left there, but we had no developer access. So we couldn't do interviews, and we had to piece together development histories from existing interviews and other online sources, then checking everything with Capcom as we went along. But archaeology isn't limited to just talking to developers, of course. So since we couldn't do that, we had to kind of get more creative and dig into the game archives. So as I mentioned, there are 12 games on this collection, but there was one variant that I really wanted to get in there. Street Fighter II, The New Challengers, had a tournament edition that linked 8 players together across 4 arcade machines in a specialized competition wrapper that has never been released at home ever and was frankly not that popular even in arcades when it was released. It took up so much space in a game center that most places couldn't afford to they couldn't afford the real estate. So I kept bugging everybody to be like, we got to get this game in there somehow. And the producer, Stephen Frost, managed to get permission to make this game available using locally linked Switch consoles instead of arcade machines. And so we were actually able to get this from Capcom, put it in the game, put it in this version of the game. And it's really just a small tweak on a beloved franchise, but preserving these small experiences that otherwise you would not be able to have, that's really what it's all about. Finding these minutia that people might have forgotten or couldn't experience today and making that available. Sometimes you get gray area access. So for SNK 40th, that collection of pre-Neo Geo SNK GameWorks, I couldn't talk directly to any developers that were still at SNK or that were contracting for SNK or even who they had the contact info for. This may sound odd, but it was because of potential legal liability. They essentially anything that these developers say would be reflective of SNK, and since they didn't have them in the fold, they didn't necessarily want I mean, the people they had in the fold, they didn't want to say stuff and be on the record. And then the people that weren't, they weren't part of the company. So it was this whole kind of, what do we do? What I wound up doing was finding a bunch of former SNK developers myself, and then I invited them to talk to me. So to the left is Hiroko Yokoyama, who worked on Crystallis, Ikari Warriors, and a bunch of other stuff before going on to Video System. And on the right is Yoshiaki Yoshino, who's SNK's original PR team all by himself, sporting a tank shirt that he maybe made one or two of. Those are he made those himself. He was the original SNK fanzine creator, zine for the fans, I should say. So how did we get their work into the game going from official to actually official? So I don't work for SNK. I'm a third party, so I can talk to whoever I want to talk to, and they can say whatever they want to me. SNK just has to then check whether what I discover is correct. Then once we have that kind of wrapped up, they're satisfied with the work, then they could hire them on as consultants, sort of wrapping the whole thing up in a nice little package. We have the info, and now they're on the payroll a little bit, so that everybody's got like plausible deniability. It sounds complicated, but with larger companies like this, especially in Japan, sometimes you need workarounds because they're still operating under the old ideas where you couldn't talk to anybody, you couldn't share information. And so in order to get around that, sometimes you have to get even more creative. And this here is all of us standing in front of the SNK building after everything kind of got wrapped, and the special edition of the collection, which will be important again later. Sometimes you're given full access, as full as you can get, which was the case with the Samurai Shodown Neo Geo collection that we just released. That game has all the Neo Geo Samurai Shodown games, including one that was never released before. We were given thousands of scans of artwork from the team because with the release, before the release of Samurai Shodown 2019, the big reboot that they did, the group at SNK, the developers there, wanted to kind of go back in time through everything that they had done in the past and see what worked, what didn't work, and just sort of learn from what they had. So they wound up scanning a lot of this stuff themselves. So we pushed them to get some more. And then I was able to go to Japan and do some documentary style interviews of several of the original developers across Osaka and Tokyo. So pretty much anything I wanted to try was possible in this case. Here we have photos of the director, Adachi, in the top left, and then his team on the top right, including two designers, Fukui and Tomita, who you see on the bottom left, playing a 500 yen death match in Samurai Shodown 3, which maybe I'll explain in the text part of this presentation. And there's a little presentation of some of the scans we got. That's an early Samurai Shodown 2 stage. I almost said Street Fighter. But this kind of work, it just doesn't make sense over video calls. You really have to be physically there in the space, getting lunches and drinks with everybody, because it brings to mind things that otherwise they might not have remembered or thought of. So walking around Osaka with the SNK developers, Osaka being the part of Osaka where SNK is based, you realize how much Neo Geo history there is just in these buildings. Like the photo on the right there, that's on top of the bridge from King of Fighters 98, the bridge that is in that Osaka stage. And we just use that for B-roll. I'll give a more concrete example. There's a game called ASO, which was one of SNK's big pre-Neo Geo games. It was a shooting game. And their first office had a rice paddy next to it. And the developers would pass by this rice paddy every day, and they would see these kabuto shrimp. They're like little armored ovals that have a tail coming out of them. And those were the inspiration for a ship in ASO, a boss, I think. And this is that building. And when I first saw this building, it was on a whim of some of the developers that I had gone to an izakaya with. We had some drinks, and then they were like, yeah, you want to see where we used to work? Because it's right around here. So we walked over there. It was nighttime. And, they were talking about this that they worked on ASO in this building. So I remembered, yeah, there were those shrimp, right? I heard there was this rumor that there were shrimp that inspired you to make this ship. Where was that? Where did that all take place? Where was that rice paddy? And they're like, oh, that's right where you're standing in what is now a parking lot. And it sounds really silly because it's just a really minor detail in an older game, but it feels it's kind of powerful to physically be in the place where all of this stuff happened, where you can you're standing with the developers who made these decisions and had these thoughts, and you can go through what they were thinking and what they were feeling under pressure to deliver something. They're like, oh, I remember those stupid shrimp that we pass by every day. And obviously 20 something years later, it's all paved. There's no kind of rice paddies and stuff, but I don't know, it makes me really feel like I'm an archaeologist finding out about these things that otherwise people wouldn't have known. Like down the street, there used to be a vending machine that was the last one in the whole area, like not just Osaka, but I think the whole prefecture, where you could get this old drink that some of the people on the team still liked. So there would be like a queue in front of this vending machine in the morning to see who could get this drink that was only sold in this one vending machine for many miles. I don't know. It's stupid stuff, but I love it. So how do you get from no access to full access? You do that by building trust and respect. Again, it was really important that I actually went there to SNK. I met their big boss, went out for drinks with developers and things like that because the rapport builds over time. When I go, I plan at least 3 days of interviews because things that folks have forgotten might be remembered the next day. It might jog their memory. And those after hours beers and things are incredibly important to finding out things that people are maybe not supposed to tell you. And then when they tell it to you, you have to figure out, okay, is there a way for me to get this into the collection without causing anybody any trouble? But people trust you if you do good work and if you represent them well, and that gets you even further next time. So as an example of this, I wanted documents, like the original versions of the scans that we got for developers to kind of rifle through in their interviews, in their on-screen interviews. And I knew that at the SNK office, there were documents in this climate-controlled room. This is where they were all held, along with like packages and old cartridges and just a bunch of stuff. But my main contact at SNK is like, there's no way you're getting in there, because the guy who's in charge of it, he's really, he's a stickler for things. He doesn't let people in there. I've never been in there, he says, as somebody who works in that office every day. But I was like, just send him an email, tell him that Brandon is here all the way from California and would just like to meet him. And so he's like, he's probably not going to work. He it doesn't matter what your name is. He doesn't know a lot of Western people. He doesn't remember Western names and stuff. I was like, just try. So he tries, and the guy's like, oh, Brandon, sure, I'll come on down. So he comes down, and we shake hands, and he's like, how you doing? You want to come up and see what we got? And I'm like, yes, please. So we wound up with tons of documents, these gorgeous originals for the developers to look through. People don't realize this, but like that, the logo that you can see on the right there, it's got a little layer of like tissue paper over it. But those logos, which I assumed were done with a computer, because they look like vector graphics, those were all done by hand and hand drawn, hand colored. I'm sure they use tools and stuff to assist them, but the Samurai Shodown image that's being held above it, that's an oil painting. This stuff is just like, they should do an art show with it. It's amazing to look at. And so, in the middle there, that's Adachi, the director, looking at these old documents and being like, oh, I forgot about this. And it was exactly what we needed. We really needed this stuff. And so much came up that we wouldn't have known about otherwise. But how did this happen? Why did he let me up there? That all comes back to this collection that you may remember from earlier. So he's a package guy, the guy in charge of this room. He really likes well put together packages and special editions and things like that, because that's what he's been kind of taking charge of for SNK for all this time. So in this collection, there is an art book. And this was put together by Nipponichi Software. And with the art book, it turns out there wasn't any extra budget for that, but somebody needed to copy edit it. Or rather, I felt that someone needed to copy edit because they were just taking some stuff from the museum and putting into the book. So I was like, all right, I'm going to copy edit it for free and make sure it's all correct. But you just have to give me credit in the book and also give credit to the layout people and whoever else work on it. But what actually happened was they only credited me. In the back of the book, there's like this halo thing. It's a memorial to me, like I've died almost is what it looks like. And so this package guy, he likes this package. He looks through the art book. He flips to the back and he's like, Brandon Sheffield, I like that book. And so he remembered my name because of this long chain of events where if anything had disrupted along that chain of events, we would not have gotten the documents, which led to some nice moments in the video. And basically that's how all of this stuff is constantly working, like happy accidents and capitalizing on those happy accidents. These relationships are super important because sometimes people just don't want to talk. We heard that Beep, which is it's a game store that specializes in arcade and old PC hardware stuff. We heard that they had some SNK games that we didn't have access to. And the manager told us to come over whenever we wanted and check it out. So when I arrived, nobody wanted to talk to me. They thought maybe I had been talking to the wrong Beep Twitter account. They didn't know what I was talking about. They didn't know what I was asking for. They just had no idea why I was there, and they were like, please go. I still love Beep, no shade on them, but they generally shooed me out of the store after I had gone 300 miles to get there from Osaka. But, you know, you win some, you lose some. So I want to dive a little deeper into this archaeology thing and take you with me on 3 of my archaeological journeys here. So this is Space Micon Kit, which is part of the Micon Kit series of games. They're like brick breakers, similar to Breakout. And they're some of the earliest games that SNK ever made, definitely the earliest ones they put their name on. All we had was 2 flyers, these 2 flyers. We'd never seen the machine, we'd never played it, we'd never met anyone who had. But another preservation organization told us we might be able to find it in a warehouse way out in Tatsuno, which is really in the middle of nowhere. So I knew it was time to take a trip. I started in Tokyo. I was actually staying there with my friend Jake Kasdal from 17-Bit. By the way, I don't live in Japan, so I have to capitalize on every opportunity I get when I get out there. It's like, okay, I'm here, I gotta go. So I started in Kyoto and had to take a local train, a bullet train, and a charter bus to get to this place. You can see my general route here. Tatsuno is very far away, very small. There's actually a bigger Tatsuno that everyone assumed I was trying to go to when I would ask questions. You can also see I've circled Tokyo on the right there. That's how far it is away from that as well. It's far. So first, 2 trains to Nagoya. Missed my bus by 5 minutes. Had to wait an hour and a half. Didn't have time to go to the book off. Really disappointing. Got on the bus and rode for hours across some real countryside Japan. And I saw this incredibly spooky rundown school that you see on the right. It's like straight out of a horror film. It was amazing. Made a quick stop at the bus mandated souvenir location. And then I arrived in Tatsuno, population 10,000, which for Japan is incredibly small. And the proprietor of this warehouse we were trying to get to picked me up in his car. And at first I was like, how's he even going to know who I am? How will he know to look for me? But then I remembered I'm the white guy, the only white guy in this town. So we drove to the warehouse. And basically every time I rounded a corner, I felt like I was in a different period film. It was a pretty amazing place. And then we arrive here, Takai Shokai, run by Takai-san, who has been doing this since his 20s. He has one assistant that you can see in the back. He's in his 60s now. He's been doing it basically since the 70s. Is that longer than 40 years? Anyway, even here, I had to build rapport. It took a couple of hours of conversation and convincing, and a letter that I had brought from SNK, like a physical letter that was signed, before I could go back and check out what he had on offer. Every time I'd be like, so you got that thing? He'd be like, let's talk some more first. So, I kind of talked to him about how important it was that he had all these games, that he was preserving them. I actually didn't realize it quite how much he had and how important what he was doing was until later. But, eventually we got to where he said I could come and check stuff out. So after all this, did he indeed have Space Mycon? He sure did. I got to play it. I got to see how it worked, everything. And so many things that we assumed about this game were wrong. And it was absolutely vital that I played this. Not only did he have Space Mycon, he had tons of other, well, at least 4 other SNK games that we didn't know very much about. On the bottom right, he's showing me a game called Mahjong Gakuen. Nobody knows what this game is. There was almost no information on the internet before I played it. There were rumors that it was a strip Mahjong game, but actually it was just totally tame, not very exciting, regular old Mahjong. But there were some critical things that we learned about it from being able to play it and see it there. On the left here, he's got a complete set of Data East Deco Arcade system cartridges. They're tapes, actually, that were given to him by the owner, the former owner of Data East. It's just, he has a lot of stuff. This is just one small view of what he's got. In fact, he has drawers for every arcade game he's aware ever existed in Japan. If he's got the board, it's in the drawer. If he doesn't, he's still got a drawer ready for it in case he gets it later. He has whatever flyers he's been able to acquire in that drawer. It's a fantastic resource. All of this led to just a few sentences about 4 games in the collection. But with Space Mycon as an example, we thought it wouldn't have a dumpable CPU and would just be a collection of circuits and transistors like other early arcade games. We also thought it would have a unique connection like so many games in like 1979 had. But all of this was wrong. It's regular JAMA. It has a CPU that could be dumped and preserved. We couldn't dump the game within the confines of this collection, but without this trip, every piece of information we had about that and 3 other games would have been incorrect. And also now we know Space Mycon can be dumped in the future, so it was absolutely worth it. Let's do some more flat-footed detective work. So in the 70s, there was a popular song called Yosaku about the difficult life of a woodcutter. This song was so popular that several companies made arcade games about it. I didn't know exactly how many, but I knew there were several, and including SNK, they made one. Now this game has never been dumped, and I was determined to find it. So to find out how many games there were, let's go back to Takai Shokai's drawers. I asked him how many Yosaku games were made, and he's like, let's go see. So we go up there. He brings me to the drawers. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 5. Awesome. Like that information in itself is cool. He didn't have the board, but he did have a flyer. And I noticed some writing on the back, so I asked to check it out. And it turns out the game was so unpopular and it lasted there for such a short time that a Game Center employee wrote instructions for installing another game onto it before throwing it away. They were basically just using it as scratch paper. And after he tossed it, Takai-san salvaged it. And it turns out actually that's how he got a lot of his flyers. He would just get whatever they were throwing away and just keep it. It was super important that he had that foresight 40-something years ago. Later, I'm in Osaka in an area called Shinsekai with my friend Diamond Fight. And Diamond says, hey, you want to check out this arcade that's only open twice per month? And obviously, that is exactly what I want to do. So we go to Kinako, which I did not get a front picture of, sorry. It's a mostly Western-oriented vintage game arcade, which wasn't that exciting to me, but since they have so many older games, I thought they might know about Yosaku, so I asked. And they're like, oh, the wood chopping game? That's promising. he's like, sure, 2 months ago I saw it down at Zarigani, but I think it's gone now. So this is exciting because Zarigani is an arcade that is in walking distance in Shinsekai, and so we went there. There's no Yosaku inside, unfortunately, but we predicted that. But the real unfortunate thing is it's an unstaffed arcade, so there's nobody to even ask about this. Diamond and I walked to all the other arcades in the area and asked about it, and by the time a shady dude in a smoke-filled strip mahjong-themed den said, listen, buddy, we don't all talk to each other, I realized I'd kind of hit a wall and should maybe just leave it alone for a little bit. I asked Diamond to check up on the place and see whether he could find a staff member since he lives in Osaka, but he never found one. Later, back home, I managed to find someone on Twitter who was documenting or trying to document every game that came through Zarigani. So I got in touch with them and found out that unfortunately, it was never SNK's Yosaku at all. It was the one by Wing. And the fact is they're all about chopping wood, so it's no wonder the guy in the first arcade got confused anyway. So there's no way to play Yosaku that we know of. You can play a pirate knockoff, which is on the Epoch Cassette Vision, or you can play an official SNK remake, which is incredibly hidden in this wild way where if you take the Neo Geo Pocket color game King of Fighters Battle to Paradise and put it into a black and white Neo Geo Pocket, it will launch a hidden remake of Yosaku, which is bizarre, but there it is. Takai-san does not believe there's a single board left in Japan, but then that screenshot that I have in the upper left, that is taken from a YouTube video. Somebody owns this thing, and they won't tell me who they are or what it is, how they have it. So unfortunately, this is where the trail ends for me because SNK 40th is out, and without official backing, I can't get permission to get these games, but maybe someone else can follow my trail and find it. So the search for Yosaku was a failure, but in between those failures, sometimes you find something totally amazing. This is Koji Takaya, the director of Samurai Shodown 5 and 6, as well as Arcana Heart and a bunch of other big fighting games. I got to interview him during the making of the Samurai Shodown collection. And while we were talking, my friend from SNK and I got a notion to ask about Akaspi. That was the nickname given this mysterious version of Samurai Shodown 5 that had a red logo. And what I'm showing here is a website that was dedicated to figuring out what this was because it was basically legendary for 15 plus years. It was on location test for only a few hours and almost nothing was known about it. And there were only these 6 shaky screenshots. So we asked Takai-san, what is this thing? Have you heard of this thing? And he looked kind of shifty, but we pressed. I have an SNK person by my side who's saying it's okay. And so we start talking about it. Turns out it was Samurai Shodown 5 Kanzenban, or Perfect Edition, a complete but unreleased Samurai Shodown game, which had been pulled after those few hours of location test. The short version of the story is SNK USA commissioned it without permission from Japan, and Japan was going through all these company shifts right then between Arze and Playmore and trying to get back to SNK again. Anyway, we asked if he had it, and weeks later, we get this. Turns out one of Takaya's coworkers had it on an old dusty hard drive. This is him playing it to confirm that it is indeed the final ROM. You can see the red logo there, which is why it was called Akaspi, red samurai spirits. So we got it, and we put it in the collection. And now, 15 years later, the final completed official SNK Neo Geo game has been released. This is a game that in the grand scheme of things, nobody even knew existed, or they knew that something existed, but they didn't know what it was. And we were able to find this and release it. And not only that, we're able to translate the story, which is one of the main new things about it. It becomes this link between Samurai Shodown 5 and 6 that just was gone forever otherwise. And Digital Eclipse, with SNK's blessing, added the word perfect to the title screen, which is what they intended to do upon release anyway, but that's a whole conversation for another time. But this kind of thing is the holy grail of game archaeology. It's something that I hope I can keep doing for a long time. This is exactly what we want out of this kind of preservation and museum-oriented curation of games and bringing that to people that wouldn't be able to see it otherwise. But obviously, it's not that easy because finding and preserving these games takes a lot of time and often fails, as you have seen through my trials, or it succeeds through luck and perseverance, or, it's all kinds of things. Basically, you need to get people to talk about things they're not supposed to have or know about, then get permission from the rights holder to get them to release those things or info to you. And that's not even getting to the actual preservation or presentation part, which is not what I handle, and that's what the rest of the whole team does. And that's a whole other situation. And unfortunately, without funding behind a collection like one of these ones that I've worked on, there's no way to justify rights holders letting you have this information. So you just get stuck a lot. For example, we don't have the data for the Famicom version of Guevara and or AKA Guerrilla War. We know where it is. There it is. Those are the discs, but we can't get it because we don't have an official way to do it. There's an unreleased Super Famicom RPG that I found out about. It stars a popular character from a big company. A former employee has the data, but not even the current employees of that company remembered that this game existed. Maybe very few people knew it existed at all. It's not like there's a finished ROM or anything, but there's map data, there's illustrations, there's tons of pre-production work, but there's no funding, so we can't get it. So to kind of wrap this up, what can you do to help? Developers, save everything, steal important things from work, keep them, give them to somebody later. Donate to the Video Game History Foundation, gamehistory.org. And importantly for us, buy these collections and convince companies that they should make more of them. I really hope that Digital Eclipse can keep bringing these games to light for years to come. And the only way that that will happen is if these games do well, and if we can make more of them, and if like pressure Konami to be like, let Brandon and Digital Eclipse make a Hudson collection. I want to make that. Tell SNK you want a Neo Geo Pocket collection. I want to make that. So that's what would help the most. And if you want to check out more stuff from me, we just had a game called Gunsport, which just came out on Stadia. If you want to check that out, my podcast, insert credit, if you want to hear more stories like these, and it's also with Tim Rogers and Frank Cifaldi. You can talk to me on our forums, follow me on Twitter, and that's it. Thanks very much.